When you dare to share, you break the silence. When you dare to share, you speak your truth. When you dare to share, you use the full strength of your voice. When you dare to share, it brings opportunity to own your story. So tell it, be heard, and at the same time, your sharing is someone else's learning, inspiration, motivation, empowerment, and hope. There's always an element to each of our stories that remains a secret. For some, we feel it's a dirty little secret. Dare to share your untold story exposes these secrets in a welcoming and positive way. I encourage each of you out there to dare yourself to share what is yours to tell. When we dare, it is the courage to do something really important. Let this be a vow to each and every single one of us that we take risk, we brave, confront, and face what is, while inspiring and empowering all communities. So let's break that silence and tap into mental beauty. This is Salima Jadavji, your podcast host, a practicing social worker, and your mental wellness connoisseur. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast, episode number 77, The Entrepreneurship Struggle, Unspoken Hardships, Refined and Transformed. To all my fellow listeners, before we get started, I'm just dropping in a note to give you a heads up that this podcast might be emotionally triggering for you. We do invite guests onto the show who share openly about extremely difficult life moments with exposure and impact of what the struggles have been like. The intensity of each episode could have a variable impact on your emotional and mental well-being based on your own personal story. If at any point the topic becomes uncomfortable or upsetting to you in any way, please do not pressure yourself to listen. Instead, be kind to yourself, do some self-care, and perhaps give another episode a try. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our courageous and daring guest, Ethan Fung. Ethan is the CEO and co-founder of Expressime, an artificial intelligence resume builder that creates custom-tailored resumes based on a job description's keywords and a user's database of skills and experience. Expressime synthesizes a resume custom-tailored to that job description. It doesn't falsify information, but helps the user articulate themselves to have the best shot at landing an interview. Ethan has over 3 years of experience in communications in guest relations at Disney World, setting up business operations and creating technical solutions for startups and government. He is a bona fide storyteller at heart. He loves to share his authentic self through video editing and storytelling about his entrepreneurial journey through quick posts on LinkedIn. Ethan helps the next generation through mentorship and teaching and loves to get to know new people. He volunteers at his local church to support the Saturday youth nights and Sunday school. Well, hello, Ethan. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast.
Hi, Salima. It's a pleasure to be on here. Thank you.
Awesome. Ethan, it's a real treat to have you on as a guest today for the podcast. I really am grateful for your willingness to be here and your willingness to share your story. For me, it's like a continuous blessing and honor to encounter guests like yourself who allow me to tap into their vulnerabilities and draw from their strength, insight, and inspiration, and sharing that in this space. It's so important that we take a stance together to help break barriers of mental stigma.
Yes, 100%. I think being able to be authentic and really just share my true self with others just makes the journey of entrepreneurship and just life in general a lot more digestible, because it's so easy to be like, oh, well, I'm struggling, no one else is struggling, but no, like we're all struggling in some sense. So just being able to have a platform like this to just share these stories is an awesome opportunity as well.
Oh, amazing. And in case you're still wondering, Ethan, this podcast is all about bringing forward untold stories that people go through, whether directly about a mental health struggle or something else. And something that we know is that no matter what the story is, there is impact on one's own mental health in some way, which remains tucked away. So, this platform serves in a way to break down the barriers of mental stigma that have been conditioned in our society. So, today, together, my hopeful mission is that for the both of us to be able to encourage people to share and tell what individuals typically have reservation to express. And of course, I continue bringing forward a trend. It's called the mental beauty rethink. So, Ethan, what comes to mind first when you hear this phrase, the mental beauty rethink?
Mental beauty rethink.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, being able to kind of expose mental health not in the way that we have in the past with a lot of stigma and just this mentality of just pushing forward and just doing better and trying a little harder, right? And just
Right.
like not kind of disclosing to one another that, hey, like I am struggling, I am suffering, right? And I think being able to kind of go into that rethink and show that, hey, like I am vulnerable, this is a struggle, but I accept that, right? Because I think like in the past we would just shove it aside. Whereas now, like being able to have an opportunity to share, this is who I am and this is what I'm going through and this is me, just allows, one for myself to just be more confident and be more, accepting of myself, but to really be that light to other people as well, saying like, hey, it's okay to share these things that we're going through. It's okay to be vulnerable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're all human at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
It's a matter of like, are we going to admit that we're struggling or not, right? Because
Mhm.
everyone's going through it. It's just a matter of not a blemish, it's a beauty.
Right. You said some really key points. So when you were mentioning the idea of there's this mentality of pushing forward and pushing harder, and then there's this idea of openness to share the struggle and be seen and be heard and show up with your vulnerability. And when you talked about acceptance, I was thinking of the notion of like a mental beauty being this idea of acceptance, invitation and acceptance, right? So you mentioned opportunity to share it. So it's almost like you're claiming it, right? Like you're claiming that this is who I am and admitting to vulnerability, being okay. So there's a lot of permission, which I really thought was really cool, actually. It's a
Yeah.
it's a great perspective, and the enthusiasm that you bring with it is quite rich. Yeah.
I mean, like I wasn't always this way. I'd say like for a while, I would definitely hide a lot of that aspect of me, but I definitely learned to grow and be more comfortable being
Hmm.
more authentic.
Absolutely, 100%. All right. So, Ethan, now is the time for your deep dive. I hope that you are ready. You got this. I know you do. So, Ethan, give us the newspaper headline of how you would title your untold story. What would it say?
All right. So my newspaper title
Mm-hmm.
would be this: Becoming the Generation of Change. How empathy for his past turned his fear into faith.
All right. Say it one more time for me.
Becoming the Generation of Change. How empathy for his past turned fear into faith.
Becoming the generation of change. How empathy for his past turned fear into faith. Okay, you've got to give us a little insight into where this title comes from for you.
Sure. I think for me, this idea of like generation of change in the past, I would definitely think like, oh, like other people can do these things, right? But not me, not me. Like I'm just a guy. I have my little path that I'm staying on, this predefined idea of what I thought other people wanted me to be, and I wouldn't think anything else of it.
Mm-hmm.
All the things that I struggled with, I just had to endure them. So I would just leave it at that and kind of accept the status quo. But as I've kind of grown this past year in my life, emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, it's really allowed me to take more ownership of who I am as a person and how I want to kind of live my life, no longer in a way that is predefined by other people's expectations and letting that fear of their perceptions of me.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm able to, make changes in my life that I want to see because I know that when I was younger or when I was growing up, that I would have loved to have that mentality, but that support, and knowing that just someone's perspective out there was going through that would have made a world of a difference. And so that's allowed me to kind of open up, like I said before, and be more comfortable with being my authentic self.
Mm. Thank you for sharing what that meant to you and what it means to you. So this is a great segue. Let's take it right into telling us what your untold story is all about. Give us that snapshot.
Yeah. We can go very, very deep back to childhood and trauma there. A lot of that adds up to this big moment in my life, which happened this past year. Um, it was my last year of university. I was going through a breakup. There's so many things that were spiraling out of my control, and it was tough. It was tough.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I just felt like, oh, this is just what I have to deal with. This is something I'm struggling with. It was only until I really hit rock bottom that I was like, shoot, like I gotta change, because this old mindset that I was kind of playing with was like, just continue to move forward, just continue to stick it out. I think growing up in a very Asian household, right? Like I was the oldest, I was very much a quote unquote obedient child, right? Like I want to please my parents. I want to show them respect, but that did lead to a level of codependency that I developed. And so for me, what I thought success meant was pleasing other people, doing what they asked me to do, finding satisfaction in the way they saw me. If I was doing well, it's because I was hearing no complaints. But if I was being lectured at, or made a mistake, that severely hampered my own self-worth, because I was weighing it on what other people saw of me.
Right.
And so it was that kind of mindset and mentality that did help me to survive growing up, whether it's through elementary or high school, and even in university. But towards the end, that framework, that mindset that I was working with, it only could take me so far before, I was burning out, and I was starting to feel this bitterness and resentment towards the people I was pleasing, because I was like, oh, well, even though I think, I have like this gut instinct or this intuition to do things certain ways, or what I think I would want for my life, right? I would actually just push that aside, because I was like, oh, well, that's not what this person's wants. That's not what they think is helpful or correct, right? So I'm just going to brush myself aside and just keep doing what they are probably thinking, because they're probably correct, right? Who am I? I'm just a person. The thing is, like, I would never see myself in the way that I would treat anyone else, right? This perspective of like being worthy, or like being okay with making a mistake. I felt that if I like messed up, I would become unlovable.
Wow. So this mindset that you talk about, like you mentioned obedience, and like, being obedient and finding satisfaction in how you were seen in the eyes of your parents. Would you say that it was driven in fear?
I think with my parents, for them, they loved me and they did their best to raise me in a way that they thought was best. And I love that, because they were giving me the best that they could. That fear, though, really came from that experience, not knowing, what my worth was, except knowing when I did wrong, right? And not to say my parents didn't like encourage me occasionally, right? Like they did sometimes, right? But I think they were so focused on, what was not there, that kind of became my focus too. And not to say like I can't blame them, right? Because that's kind of the way they were raised, right?
Like culturally, it's not spoken. We don't necessarily take the time to praise our children, but that doesn't mean we're not proud of them. But if you being raised in a Western society, you see other children getting praise, and if you're not getting praise, were you associating that with like, I'm not good enough, I'm not getting the high fives, I'm not getting acknowledged?
I would say I just didn't know any better.
Or you didn't know any better? Okay.
That's just the way I was raised, and that's kind of what I just accepted. Whether that was like intentional or not, I just came to the conclusion like, oh, well, if I'm not getting 100%, if I'm not getting that last percent done, then who am I, right? Like I failed to a certain extent. And not to say like my parents were very, very hard on me to be like, oh, you need to get that. But I think that was just the mindset that ended up being adopted, where I would get a lot of fear and anxiety if I couldn't do it perfectly, because that would affect my quote unquote my thoughts of how people would perceive me as, like, oh, someone who is unworthy, who is not enough, who can't get the job done. And that was a big driver of that fear, and it gave me a lot of just stress, because I didn't want to be perceived in that way.
Right. So you were attaching your worthiness to how you could be seen as satisfactory in the eyes of someone else. Like how satisfactory, and that you showed up in the best way in their eyes or in their viewpoint.
Yeah. And because I tied that self-worth to other people's perspectives, right? Like I wasn't comfortable even like being by myself, because I needed someone to define my worth, right? Like whether it was good or whether it was bad. Like if I sat down and just like thought about myself, like I would be like, who am I? Like I don't even know if I like the person that I am, because I just didn't know how to describe that without someone doing that for me.
Right. To sit with all of that and to have that internal process, like what was it like to experience that?
Yeah, it was an interesting experience, because I think last year about this time, so in May last year, like that was kind of this boiling point where, after experiencing that mindset for 22 years, I came to the point where I was like, okay, this has to change, right? Like clearly what I thought was like trying harder would lead to more success, it hasn't, right? I tried harder and it just got worse. It felt like I was just suffering more the more I tried. So I knew at this point, like, I needed to do something else. And this is how my entrepreneurship journey actually began. It was actually a combination of not just like vocational growth, but this stuff that was going on internally, like this change in mindset to where I am today. I never considered entrepreneurship before. Like for me, I really wanted to get that 9 to 5,
Right.
get my benefits, clock out when I don't have to think about work. And that was kind of the goal I was aiming for. But
So it was never a consideration for you
no,
to be on an entrepreneurship journey.
but it was through kind of, you say by chance, but I think really like God put me on this path where like I started to learn more about entrepreneurship, and I ended up getting a lot of these doors opened to explore my startup and get sponsored and network and all these things that just opened up to where I am today. But it really started with this growth mindset, really being able to see like, oh, just because I didn't execute correctly doesn't mean I'm a failure. Being able to see like failure as a way to indicate where to go next, right? Where to pivot, where to kind of take the next challenge. So I think it was that fear that held me back from trying, right? For a while, right? That procrastination, that anxiety, that was the biggest thing holding me back from really being my authentic self, because I was so worried about what other people would think. What if this is not approved by other people? But now I'm okay being able to kind of go through that path, because it is who I am. And honestly, like, it's allowed me to be that authentic self. I don't have to have that fear. I don't have to have that bitterness. I don't have to have that resentment.
Right.
Because I'm choosing to be myself. And if people don't like that, that's fine, right?
But you're claiming it. So just before we talk more about the authentic self, let's go back to before you got this aha moment of being able to pivot and transform. Did you have any supports? Because I know that you mentioned you didn't know better and you were sitting with all of these tough emotions and, a lot of confusion and fear holding you back. Did you have any supports?
Yeah, I would say growing up, I had mentors and, people from my church that I was able to like chat and talk with. But I think this journey that I kind of went through was really something I had to deal with by myself. But I was able to go to therapy, just see more of my, I don't know, internal thoughts, if you want to put it like that.
An internal blueprint, right? Like of just kind
Yeah.
of how things are taking its shape and form.
I'd say like cognitive behavioral therapy was a tool that I used to really see these cognitive dissonance. That was something so crazy for me, because I also grew up in the church, right? So being a Christian, it's like, oh, Jesus, Jesus died for your sins, right? Like, oh, you shouldn't be sad. Like, you need to, everything's okay, right? And in theory, yes, right? Like, yes, that's what I believe. But, the cognitive dissonance in my mind was so divergent from that path where it's like, even though I knew that I, was loved and accepted, it's like, I didn't feel that way about myself, right? So
Mhm.
my actions really showed something different. It's like, I'd be like paralyzed with fear when like I was doing an action that was opposed to my belief, which is like, I still feel unworthy. I still feel unloved, right?
Right.
Advocating for myself was so hard because I felt that I don't deserve to advocate for myself. And it's not like I was like, oh, because I'm unworthy. Like that was the underlying belief that was like
Mhm.
holding me back because I was like, I still think my worth is defined by how well I am perceived, right? And like
Right.
I don't want to be perceived poorly by doing this, right? By
Mhm.
advocating for myself, by standing up for myself, right? Like no,
Mhm.
like I need to put their needs first. And that just led to a lot of anxiety and a lot of like paralysis because
Right.
I just thought one thing, but my body did another.
Right. So tell me more about how you were affected, having gone through this journey of, fear and parental expectations and the entrepreneurship journey and, all the struggles in between and you talking about this idea of standing up for yourself or being able to prioritize yourself and really focusing on what was important for you. How did that all unfold? Like how were you impacted by all of that?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think for me, being able to, go through this entrepreneurship journey, it didn't start the smoothest. I'd say like it still took me some time to grow out of that mindset.
Hmm.
When I first started, I really felt that I still struggled to advocate for myself, right? I was still worried about what other people thought, even though I was the CEO, the leader, right? Like, even though I was the leader, like, I felt like I don't want to give them a bad impression, right? And I would put that at the expense of doing what needed to be done for the company's success to a certain extent
Hmm.
because I was so worried about how other people perceive me. I ended up not leading to my fullest potential because I was worried that I'd offend someone or I would, put them in a position where they felt annoyed maybe at me for a little bit. Even though like if I were to explain the situation and be like, hey, at the end of the day, this is what we need to do, they would have been fine with that. Right. But no, because I was so worried about that perception, I just didn't. And that actually led to a lot of conflict within my team for a while. And that was a big learning lesson. And it led to a lot of failure too. Like one of our co-founders left. We ended up having different visions for the product. But
Right.
one thing I realized was like the communication aspect was lacking so much because I was afraid to step up. I was afraid to say what was needed to be said because I was so worried about my own perception. And
Right.
that was such a big pivotal moment because for me, how do I want to lead this company in the future, right? Like the culture starts with me. And so as we hired interns, as we brought new members on the team, me and my co-founder, we tried to live that out and really be more authentic and be more comfortable with leading, right? And
Right.
and aligning with expectations and vision and keeping the communication channels open.
And communication is so important, right? And even when you have to talk about the tough stuff, it needs to be talked about, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I'm sure that you noticed that fear might have kept showing up in different ways. And you probably, I'm assuming, at times felt like you were at combat with fear. But it sounds like the more that you like wrestled with it, that it became more familiar to you. Like, oh, this is that guy fear, and so
Yes.
you knew that, okay, it's coming up and like, fear is in full fledged, but I know how to tackle this. I know what to do. Do you feel like you were able to tap in to yourself in that way? And as you were getting more familiar with what was coming up for you, that you could pivot differently and more quickly?
Yeah. I think one thing I've learned is that being uncomfortable and like, having that quote unquote fear really is an opportunity to grow.
Hmm.
And I think for me, that's something that I've learned to be more comfortable being uncomfortable. Like,
It's actually a Dare to Heal motto that we have, to get comfortably uncomfortable. So it's kind of like you were doing that, right? Kind of gauging that discomfort and going, okay, I can tightrope walk this.
because I would always see, like, I knew on the other side, like, if I were to persevere, it would only better me. It would only allow me to grow. It would only allow me to have more experience under my
Hmm.
belt. It would only allow me to gain more
Mm.
wisdom. And it was through that I was able to be just more willing to let go, because I think a lot of the fear that I cultivated over time was through this aspect of control and trying to hold on to what I perceived was correct. And I think being able to let go of that, I can feel that not just mentally, but like physically too. Like even now, like I'm learning to let go of like the physical tension in my body, because I get so fixated on trying to control these things that my body is like showing the tension, is showing the
Yeah.
stress. And that's something like that I've been able to really just take a step back and let go, and let God, for me, take over. Because I think if I were to try to control everything,
Right.
I know that I cannot, but yet I would still try anyways. But being able to let go has allowed me to just rest and restfully.
Yeah. And I really liked how you talked about like essentially tapping into opportunity of discomfort, right? So, this is uncomfortable. And if I work through this, then this is a possibility for me. There are these great outcomes. So you were able to see possibilities when you could look at discomfort and not get off put. Like, you were seeing it as an opportunity. And it seems like the more you could see it as an opportunity, the more you were able to let it go
Yeah.
and trust the presence.
Yeah. I would say like even like, that bitterness and resentment that built up, I would get fixated on that. And I would be like, oh man, like, oh, if only they thought in this way, if only like they would change, or
Right.
this
Focusing
didn't
on
happen.
external control that you actually don't have any control over, right? Fixating on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
But one thing I've definitely learned is more empathy for my family, for those that I may be at odds with, because I've definitely learned that one, it's not in my control, right? I can't control how they act.
Hmm.
But honestly, like where they're coming from as well, is they are going through their own struggles, their own battles. And, I'm not going to say like, oh, I should just roll over, right? But
Hmm.
that empathy allows me to have a lot more patience and kindness towards them, because I know that at the end of the day, like they are going through, similar struggles that I'm facing, right?
Right.
And I'm just grateful that I'm brought up in a generation where I have access to these tools. I can learn more about my mental health. Like I'm learning about like cognitive functions, and it's just so cool to see how personalities are, and like understanding why people act the way they act. Sometimes it's not
Hmm.
really something you can be like, oh, just fix that, right? But each person is so unique and so different
Right.
that to shoehorn them in one box is just to discredit all that they are as a person.
Right. And it sounds like you have allowed your mind and internal process to flourish and really take a step back and see the whole picture. When you share what you've experienced and what you've grappled with, you can see all the subtle shifts and changes just from what you've shared so far. It's really fascinating. And so I'm curious, Ethan, with everything that you have shared about your journey through fear, through entrepreneurship, and, how fear was cultivated and conditioned within you, and that whole process that you've been through, and contending with expectations, and, your self worth being guided by in the eyes of others. Right now, what part of the journey would you say that you're in? And what I mean by that is like when people come to see me for therapy, individuals, they're typically in like one of three places, So some people are getting started where they know they've got to work on some stuff. And so they just need some help to start verbalizing or sorting out their puzzle pieces. Some people are in the middle, sometimes prompted by something acute, or they're just in the thick of things and they need support with navigation. And some people are looking back where they're closing some chapters in their life, or they're, about to move forward into a different area. Or, people are just on a personal growth journey. So they want to be able to understand things from, previous times of their life. So for yourself, what part of the journey would you say that you're in? Would you say that you are getting started, in the middle, or looking back?
I would say definitely my life goes through different chapters.
But with what we've discussed today so far, with this particular journey, where would you say you are?
Yeah, for sure. I'd say like I've definitely taking the first few steps in the right direction. And, the fact that I can reflect and be like, oh yeah, you know what? This is what I've learned. Like I had to go through a process to go through that. But I'd say like where I'm at, like would probably still be at the beginning.
Okay.
There's still so many things that I recognize that I'm still learning, especially with my actions, the way my mindset is. The fact that I can describe it to you,
Mm-hmm.
I've learned something, but I still recognize, like, I still get caught in these patterns where I'm like behaving in a way that I feel unworthy or
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm not enough. And, I'm able to catch myself now and be like, hey, wait, you are that guy. You are worthy, right? You are enough. And that's allowed me to kind of take a step back. But there's still this growth aspect that I know that I want to continue to move forward with. And so for me, what I know is that at the end of the day, there's just this aspect of being present that I'm trying to still incorporate into my life, right? I think
Right.
I've definitely got a lot better than I've been in the past,
Mm-hmm.
but I know that I can still easily let my mind wander to, well, I still need to do this. I still need to figure out, stuff with
Mm-hmm.
the startup. I still got to figure out relationships and my family and all these things that seem to be pulling me towards like, well, just keep going, just keep treading, right?
Like the old narrative, right? Like the old
Yes,
narrative gets in
yes,
the way. And you're contending with that and saying, hey, now I've got a new version of things. And so it's still a little on the new side, I think I'm hearing you say.
yes. It's like creating that muscle memory
Yes,
that I'm still
exactly.
figuring out.
Hmm. And so if you are feeling like while there's been a lot of growth and you still feel that I'm at the beginning, I'm still learning to recognize my actions and, my mindset just gets stuck from time to time. And, I am taking a step back and I can see the growth, that push pull factor going on. How are you going to know for yourself that you're moving through that timeline where you're no longer at the beginning, that perhaps you've treaded your way into the middle? How would you know you're there? What do you think would be different for you?
I would definitely be a lot more at peace, I'd say. I think it's easy to just be taken out of the present moment
Hmm.
and just have that anxiety, have that grasp on me. And I'll still be thinking, oh, what about next? Well, what do I have to do next? And
Hmm.
then again, it'll show through my body. It'll show like I'll be tensing up, like I'll have shorter breath,
Mm.
right? I'm not being in control of what I am in control of, which is my present moment. I
Right.
can control my breath. I can be taking that sweet oxygen in so I can just
Hmm.
let my brain kind of like calm down.
Mm.
And so I know that the steps that I'm trying to take are like learning to be present, right?
So they're going to become more automatic. They're going to become your
Yeah.
new knee jerk reaction. The
Yes. Yes.
idea of, being more at peace and feeling relaxed and really fully able to let go and really be in that presence of mind that you spoke about.
Yes. The default state.
Yes. You're really trying to create that new and cultivate that new default sweet spot for yourself.
Yes.
I
Yes.
love it. This is so cool. All right. So let me ask you, I mean, there's a lot of things that you've mentioned that you're grateful for, right? Like, for example, you've transformed this fear into so much success, not even considering before that you would ever be on an entrepreneurship journey. Are there any aspects of gratitude along the path that you've experienced that you haven't shared yet?
Yeah. I would say gratitude is something that I've been able to hone in a lot more
Hmm.
recently.
Hmm.
In the past, I would always think that even though I have, these blessings in my life, oh, like I didn't earn it, like maybe my parents worked really hard, but I didn't earn it. And so like maybe I'm not that deserving. And I would brush it aside. So like all these things that like were physical blessings in my life, I would
Hmm.
choose to turn the blind eye because I felt unworthy of those blessings. But as I've learned to grow and cultivate, my relationship with God, I think it's allowed me to realize like, hey, like technically who decides what my portion is?
Hmm.
For me, like what I believe is God defines that. If I say that, oh, well, I don't deserve it, well, who's telling you that? This is what is not true. If this is what I have, then let me enjoy that, right? Because
Right.
one day I might not have it, right? I might not have this portion or this blessing, and that
Hmm.
will be a different season. But right
Right.
now, if I'm given it or I'm taken away, like that is not in my control. So
Hmm.
all I can do is just enjoy this moment. For someone to say like, oh, well, you didn't deserve that, or you didn't work hard. Well, you know what? God gave it to me, so I'm not going to argue with him. And that
Right.
that's allowed me to just have so much more peace because this is the portion I've been given and I'm going to enjoy it.
Right. And this is how I can see how you're really working that process for enjoying the presence of moment, like being in the here and now, and the presence of mind outlook, and allowing yourself to connect with joy and be at peace with what's happening right now in this moment, moment by moment.
Yeah, I would say
Very
being
cool.
able to just recognizing where I'm at and just what this is. Again, I would always look to the future and always be like, well, I can't wait for this. I can't wait for that. But that just completely neglects all the, the time and energy that I've put in to get to where I am
Of
in
course.
this present moment, right? Like I deserve to enjoy the fruits of my labor, like the portion that I've been given. And in order to honor my past self, I need to be present and enjoy the blessings of today. And in order to enjoy the future, I need to enjoy the blessings of today as well. Because when that future becomes today, if I'm focused on the future, I'm not going to be enjoying that future today.
Right. And it is such an important lesson and learning to be present. So we're not only future focused, because future focus means that exactly what you said. Well, that future comes the present and we're not acknowledging it. And we're on to the next part of the future and everything goes unacknowledged. So by taking that moment to slow your process down, focus on the present and take it in really allows you time and space to connect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
wonderful.
being able to just really take it in, like that, like you said, that gratitude, gratitude is so important because again, when you're caught up in what's not enough, what you need next, then you're obviously not going to be, not to say you can't do both, right? But I say like more often than not, you don't focus on what you currently have because sometimes it becomes a comparison game. It becomes like, well, this is not where I want to be, the perfection game,
Right.
the self-worth game.
Yeah.
You define what you have is who you are. And I think that's the game that I got caught up way too much. And now I'm able to just take that step back and be like, hey, you know what? I don't have to play this anymore. Like I can let go and just be present.
Very cool. And it's like letting go of all the external factors and really just connecting with yourself. And I hear that in your process as you explore this journey today. It's very thought provoking. It really resonates. So Ethan, we've talked about your journey from so many different aspects of external factors and your internal process and people that you were influenced by and how you were defining self-worth and contending with staying present and working your process. How would you say, this is what I'm really curious about, how would you say that your untold story, the one you're sharing today, affected your mental health at the time? What kind of a toll did you really notice on your mental well-being?
Yeah, I'd say this feeling of not being enough, this like hole of seeking, whatever that I thought would fill that pain that I was going through. That was something that I think really affected me. And being able to have the story that I have today, and if I were to share this with my past, it would give me a lot of peace to be honest. Just like knowing that in spite of the things that I was going through, like things would have turned out all right because God was taking care of me. But also like just knowing that me, myself, I am worthy and I did come out of the other side because I am enough, right? Like that would have brought a lot of clarity.
Yeah. And so tell me, when you were feeling not enough and you were seeking what you thought would fill that void, what kinds of thoughts were you entertaining? Like, can you also recall emotions that you experienced along with the thoughts? But yeah, do share that.
Yeah. Yeah. I would feel like very, very worthless. Like, oh, like I'm nothing. Like I'm trash. Like I don't bring any value. Like I don't see myself as lovable, as like person of worth. And I would feel disgusted with myself. Like I remember journaling and I'd be like, man, like I hate being by myself. I just need someone else to like tell me who I was. And obviously that was very unhealthy, but that's the only way I knew how to cope. And just like having kind of feeling rock bottom at the time, I was just like, what is this? Like, I'm just so uncomfortable. Like, I forced myself to be in positions where I was like just by myself because I knew like I needed to grow in that way. But like, I was like squirmish. I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
just anxious. I was trying to like do something that would fill me up besides myself.
Right.
And that just was very, very uncomfortable and painful and just made me jittery and squeamish.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And did you notice that while you had all these competing inner thoughts of, I'm nothing, I'm trash, I have no value, I'm not lovable, it really sounds like you were feeling alone. And you mentioned really feeling worthless. And you even said disgusted. So those were the emotions, those are some of the competing inner thoughts. Did you notice that if it affected you in any other way, like did it come out physically in any way, like in your physical body?
I think for me, tension's always been a big thing, right?
Like muscle tension?
Muscle tension, like
Okay.
very like tight. Because I was just trying to like control and like fixate on like one thing. Like I couldn't really let go. And I think that tension was a side effect of that,
Mm,
of just not letting go of being present. That's what I'd say would probably be something physical. Just like even body perception, right? I just like, oh, like you're so, you're not that good looking, like you're like, you're overweight or
mhm. Like putting yourself down when you were already in a compromised state, very vulnerable, compromised state.
and I think it was just, oh, like I need to reject myself, put myself in a position to like feel that way because I didn't. If I'm not gonna say it, I'm sure someone else will, and just then my worth is defined by that. Like I might as well just define my worth already by like the worst case scenario.
Hmm. Hmm. And, a couple moments ago, you were mentioning, if I could have told my past self things that I know about myself now, things might have turned out differently. So that brings me to what would be your key message to the listeners of our show? What do you think is really important for them to know?
I'd say just to know that you as a person, you have so much potential and so much ability and so many skills and experiences that to put yourself in a box, to predefine yourself based on what other people have set as their expectations, is just creating such a carbon copy, a watered down version of who you are.
Hmm.
To hold yourself by someone else's standards is, I get it, right? That's what I did. That's what I knew. That's the only thing I knew for a while. But
Hmm.
now that I know better, I know that there's just so much more life to have, and just so much more joy to have when you're authentic, when I'm being myself. And again, it had to start with knowing myself. So know yourself,
Hmm.
know who you are. Take the time to see like, hey, here I am with all my flaws, with all my blemishes, but all my beauty at the
Hmm.
same time. And I'm, fearfully and wonderfully created. And that is something that I can embrace because at the end of the day, if other people won't, you have the ability to.
Right. And other people can only recognize and see what you show them. So if you are embodying this whole notion that you said of take the time to get to know yourself, your blemishes, the beauty, and fearfully and wonderfully create it for yourself. Well, that's what people can see then.
Yeah. I think for a long time I was waiting for someone to tell me what my worth was. And
Right.
when they didn't say it, I just guessed that I had no worth. But I have the opportunity to do that now, and that's allowed me to just have so much more joy and authenticity and realness. So I can say, hey, I am worthy, and I am loved.
Yeah. Say it and own it. Okay, so Ethan, I'm curious about what was game changing for you in terms of inspiration. Was there any inspiration that's close to you that was game changing for you that reflects your untold story? Some people share with me that there's a quote or a book or a person or an event or something that really spoke to them. Is there anything like that for you?
Yeah, I would say for me, like I am a Christian. One Bible verse that does speak a lot of inspiration to me is from the book of First Timothy 4-12, which says, "Don't let anyone think less of you because you're young." being an example to all believers in what you say and the way you live, in your love, in your faith, and your purity. And for me, this quote is so powerful because, again, like I would always think, I'm just a kid. I am, defined by the ways people have said I am. But that's not the case. Like, I'm one, defined by God, and two, I'm defined by myself, right? And these things have allowed me to be like, I can change the game just as much as anyone else. I don't need to wait for someone's permission to start living the life that I want to live. I can do that right now and really just show up as my true authentic self.
I can see how you've embodied this. This is something very clear cut in your mind.
Yeah. And again, I didn't come here overnight, right? Like it took me this whole life journey to be where I am. And to be honest, like I still struggle. Like I still will sometimes default into like the past habits, but this has allowed to guide me as a North Star and saying like, hey, I've done it in the past and I will continue to persevere by God's grace and by being willing.
Of course. And so what is a cause or organization that has been impactful to you on your journey that you would like to give a shout out to?
And in the entrepreneurial aspect, definitely one of the accelerators I joined, the League of Innovators, was very, very instrumental in just growing me as a person. They had like great leaders, great group discussions that I was able to be a part of, but also just giving me guidance in how to become a better entrepreneur, how to just embody more of that growth mindset. And that's allowed me to incorporate in everything I do today. So the League of Innovators have been a great resource, great family that I've been able to be a part of.
That's awesome. So shout out to League of Innovators. Amazing. All right. So Ethan, how can people connect with you if they would like to? How are you findable?
So Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. And if you're curious to learn more about my startup, Xresume, it's xresume.ca. Feel free to check out what we're doing there. We're cooking up some great things and helping the next generation.
Awesome.
That's where you can find me.
Awesome. And we have grabbed all of your platform information, so it should be on the show notes page for the viewers. Excellent. Okay, Ethan, guess what?
What?
You've just dared yourself to share. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Lima.
Yeah. Ethan, I would just like to take a moment to express my gratitude for the story that you've shared today. Really, truly showing up in your truest, authentic form, sharing a story that is so relatable for so many. And the fact that you were able to do it with such vulnerability, you really tapped into the struggles that you faced and how you moved through them, how you've been overcoming it. And there's so much depth when we talk about the mindset that stems from fear and how you shifted your growth, your character growth through the growth mindset and redefining your inaccurate definition of failure and permission to be and presence of mind. All of these pieces combined is a really revealing story. And I'm truly grateful to have been able to hear and witness your story today. So thank you for the deep conversation and for all the daring and sharing.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Salima, for having a platform that I could share on.
Amazing.
It's really just been an honor as well to be able to have an opportunity to share. So thank you so much again.
Oh, wonderful. And once again, Ethan, thank you for being part of Dare to Share Your Untold Story and helping to be a voice in breaking down the barriers of mental stigma. To all of our listeners, if you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and you want to be part of breaking down barriers of mental stigma, I invite you to go wherever you are listening to the episode and hit subscribe. Leave us a comment or a review of the episode and maybe how you relate to it. To learn more about what we offer, visit www.daretoheal.co. And if you are feeling ready and brave to share, please submit your story by visiting www.daretoshare.co. Thanks for joining in.